So we're back in the epilogue of the Gospel of John, which is John chapter 21. And we're going to be doing the second half of the miraculous catch of fish. So even though we're going to be beginning at verse 7, for context, can somebody please read chapter 21, verses 4 to 14?
Just as the day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore. Yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Children, do you have any fish?" They answered him, "No." He said to them, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved therefore said to Peter, "It is the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. The other disciples came in the boat, dragging a full net of fish, for they were not far from the land, but 100 yards off. When they got out on the land, they saw a charcoal fire in place, with the fish laid out on it, and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have just caught." So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have some breakfast." Now none of the disciples dared ask, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and so with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead.
Okay. So where we left off last time, I was making some connections between this and the feeding of the 5,000, because that's what John does, is he's connecting the two passages kind of with, as he usually does, word usage and themes. But we don't quite see all of it, of course, because you don't really get some bread until they actually land. So they're responsible for the fish part, and I'll be getting into that. And then we'll also have the question of why so many fish and stuff like that, but again, we'll get to it when we get to it. So what we ended up talking about until last time, because we got to verse 6, and then Jesus says, throw your net again, throw it on the right side of the boat, and as you might recall, I could not find any symbolic significance to this. I tried, I did not really see anything. So Jesus just says, cast the net again, and they did. And they had such a large number of fish, they couldn't bring it in. So that brings us to verse 7, where the disciple whom Jesus loved, so this is John, who's narrating the gospel, he says to Peter, "It is the Lord." And Lord there can still be a very loaded term. So I'll just briefly look at this again. So you have the translated word Lord. So the different translations that we draw from this are usually Sir, and this comes up here and there in the Gospels. You also have Master, so somebody who is leading you. And this is what the disciples use the vast majority of the time. But then you will, and this would be somewhat connected to Rabbi, just so you know. But now that Jesus Christ has risen again, it could be related to the divine name of God, Yahweh, which is often enough coming up as Lord, because they don't want to accidentally misuse the name of the Lord their God, because that's the second commandment. So it's been a tradition for hundreds of years at this point in time to use the word Lord instead of the divine name Yahweh. So after Jesus Christ is risen from the dead, this does seem to be at least one or two uses. So in St. Thomas, when he sees the risen Lord Jesus Christ and Jesus invites him to inspect his hands and his side, Thomas says, my Lord and my God. So most likely he's meaning the divine name there. So hard to say exactly what the disciples are primarily meaning here. But John, speaking to Peter, could be saying, look, God is on the shore there. Yeah. Okay. And as soon as Simon Peter heard John say this to him, he takes his outer garment, and I would love to explain more what that means. However, this is the only time this word appears in the entirety of the New Testament, this specific Greek word. So all we know is that it's an outer garment of some sort. Yeah, so he had taken it off, most likely stripped down for work. Oh, sorry. Yes. So the NIV online says he had taken it off. The more literal meaning is, for he was naked.
That's what the King James says.
Yeah. That would be the direct translation from the Greek. So was Peter actually naked? No, not really. Same thing when you get Jesus saying like, I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was naked and you clothed me. Like it wasn't that people were running around naked in Israel. Like that would just be incredibly indecent for the Israelites who had a higher standard of morals than say even the Roman Empire. So when we're talking about nakedness, it's you're stripped down to your underwear basically.
Undergarments.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
That's why
which
they
is
called it the
decent
outer
enough.
garment.
Well, not exactly outer garment because we don't know exactly what that means because it only appears one time in the entirety of the New Testament. So we actually have different words for things like the cloak or coat or something like that.
What is used at the crucifixion where Jesus, isn't that an outer garment? That was
Sold in the robe on the moon.
No,
No?
no, that was actually the undergarment.
That was
That was woven in one piece.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, unless Jesus had another undergarment, he was naked at the cross.
But there was a lily robe, wasn't that one of Jesus' garments? The robe?
Well, he would have had some sort of outer garment, but I don't know about the movie. I haven't seen it, unfortunately.
Oh, this is going back to when
I remember it a long time ago.
Yeah,
Okay. I can't comment on the movie, so
well, I have that image of Jesus having a robe somewhere on him.
At least multiple layers of clothing.
no, yeah, well that's pretty standard.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's only I want to say the past century or so that we've just been thinking more in terms of one layer, like it's pretty warm the past few days, so people are going out, maybe a t-shirt and shorts, and that would be it. Yeah, no, not a century and a half ago, you'd have all the Victorian Brits walking around here in multiple layers. And theoretically, they could actually be cooler than we are. Actually, there was an experiment. This was interesting. So my sister, she was investigating different Victorian garments because she's interested in history. And so this one lady who did stuff with corsets, she was testing like modern clothing versus Victorian clothing. And the person in the corset with like multiple layers in hot sunshine on the beach was actually cooler than the person stripped down because that person had less protection against the sun, so they were directly heating up. Whereas the person with multiple layers, the outer layer of clothing was heating up, but the under layer of clothing, yeah, was not heating up.
Like insulating her from the heat.
More or less. Like it wasn't a huge difference. It was a difference by like I think 4 or 5 degrees centigrade, but that's still something. So yeah, so when Jesus and the disciples are paddling around in the desert in the hot sunshine, and I can also tell you it's very light covered soil, so the sun's heat is bouncing at you from the ground. It was very warm there. Yes, they knew how to stop a lot of the heat. Also, their bodies would be adapted somewhat to it, but still. So outer garment, and Peter would have something underneath. We don't know exactly what it is. There's no comment on that. But he was stripped down for work. So he was getting ready to go meet Jesus. Basically, he was taking on his outer garment, and he jumped into the water. So the commentary I was reading, like he didn't even think twice about it. He thought that Peter jumped into the water to help drag the net of fish, and I'm like, where on earth does that appear anywhere in the text? John does not say that. If John was going to say, hey, Peter actually helped us, I'm pretty sure he would have. But yeah, apparently him and a whole bunch of other commentators were thinking that Peter got in there just to help the net along. And I go, like, why would any fisherman do that? I don't understand this. Like, there's not really that much friction in the water. Why do you need somebody swimming with it? Like, you're not that powerful. I don't. Anyways, and I would also say that doesn't explain why he takes on his outer garment before he jumps into the water, because he'd still be doing work in the water. So why wouldn't he get dressed after when he's getting closer to the shore with the rest of the guys and then put on it?
Maybe if I
So
may
it's
say,
fishy.
maybe out of respect for Jesus as he was approaching him.
Yes, that is it. But what I'm trying to say is if Peter was still helping the boat, it doesn't make sense for him to take on the garment there while he was still working.
It also says the boat followed him.
Yeah.
So he went ahead of the boat.
I know, yeah. So I don't understand. So to me, if I'm just reading this, it seems what's actually going on is Peter is jumping into the water, swimming over to Jesus, and leaving the work to the other guys so that he can meet Jesus first.
That sounds like Peter.
Yeah, that sounds more like Peter.
Yeah, exactly.
I was thinking he put on his outer garment to meet Jesus as a matter of respect.
Yes,
Yes.
well, I know,
Yeah.
I'm saying that, but like we're not disagreeing with this. It's when he puts it
Yeah.
on is the issue. Because if he's deciding I'm going
Yeah.
to meet Jesus now, jump in water and swim ashore, then
Yeah.
he's going to put it right on right away. Whereas if he's actually helping the other guys and it's just not mentioned, then why would he do that right at that time?
Kind of reminds me of when he wanted to walk to Jesus on the water.
Yeah, exactly.
very
He's always going forward without the other guys.
He's very impulsive.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's also very explicit here in verse 8 where it says the other disciples. So when they were not far, there we go. When they were not far from shore, when they landed, they saw, like the subject is still the other disciples. You haven't introduced a new subject to say that this is including Peter. So no, Peter jumped into the water to go see Jesus first. All these scholarly commentators and they're deciding this and that without actually thinking things through. It happens a lot.
I've
Yeah.
always had a question, and maybe I think you explained it once, or maybe I wasn't listening, but it's always interested me. It says here about John. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter,
Yes.
that was John, whom Jesus loved. Now, Jesus loved all of his disciples,
Yeah.
right? But he is pointed as being somebody special. So was he?
Not specific. This actually comes up even later on in the chapter towards the end,
Is he?
where Peter asks, "Well, what about him?" Pointing to John, And then John says, well, no, not Jesus. When he says something isn't trying to elevate me, he's just saying, what is it to you?
I was wondering, was he one of the disciples that went to Jesus first, or was he sort of close to Jesus' family? Because Jesus
Well-
said to John at the cross, you take my mother and
Well, John was the faithful individual who was there with his mother, which is why Jesus was asking specifically him.
Yeah.
John would have had family connections. I can't remember the actual connection right off the top of my head. He would have been something to the effect of first or second cousin, most likely. But that has nothing to do with him being the disciple whom Jesus loved.
so is that not
The-
the same person?
It is the same person,
Yeah.
but the disciple whom Jesus loved, that title is coming from John just trying to explain Jesus' love for him as an individual.
Yeah.
So he's not trying to claim anything special. He's just saying, don't pay attention to my name. So he doesn't name himself in the entirety of his gospel.
Yeah.
Because the importance isn't on him, who's writing this and who's still alive to
Yeah.
comment on these things. The importance is always going to be on Jesus.
Mhm.
The other disciples whom he mentions are most likely dead at that time. Most likely. We don't know the exact dates of the deaths of many of them.
Mhm.
But Peter was certainly dead at this point in time. So he can be, well, that's why he's also fingered as the guy who cut off Malchus's ear. Because he wouldn't be under threat of imprisonment about that anymore. But yeah, this is John. And John, if for any special status, there was the inner circle of the disciples, where you have Peter, James, and John going to do a few different things on their own. Yeah. So he's part of the inner circle, but he, or as Jesus Christ would say, don't put yourself in authority over others. That's what the Gentiles do. Rather, outdo yourselves in service to one another. Yeah.
Thank you,
Oh.
Pastor.
No worries. So Peter jumps in the water and he's going to go see Jesus. And then the other disciples, so John isn't really being a big poor sport about this, but he is hinting that John went ahead and then we had to follow in the boat, towing the net of fish because we couldn't lift it out, especially not with the one guy gone now. So they followed in the boat, trailing the fish. So it probably was just easier to move the entire mass of things rather than actually put it in, which would put a lot of strain on the net. But I think that's why John also says, like later on in his miracle, basically that it was not broken. Because in Luke chapter 5, there's the miraculous catch. So when Jesus is calling the disciples, calling Andrew and Peter specifically, because they were working in the boat at the time, Jesus said, cast your net into the sea one last time, and they did, and they had a huge net of fish, and it was so big that the nets were starting to break, so then they called another boat to help them. Yeah. So that happened right at the beginning of ministry. It's also weird that John doesn't mention this whatsoever, because that would be a nice parallel for this particular account, but he doesn't mention it. Possibly because he wasn't there, probably because he wasn't in the other boat at the other time. In any case, the nets were about to break then. Not here. Okay. So the 6 other disciples dragged the fish, and as the boat went to shore, so they landed, they also would have just placed the net on the sand there. Most likely it was still mostly submerged, because then the fish wouldn't be flopping around as much or try to break the nets, but that's mostly what was going on. So they're off about 100 yards. original has 200 cubits, so about 100 yards, which is a decent way from the shore, but apparently John doesn't consider it not far. When they landed, oh, sorry, yeah, the word for boat. Sorry. For some reason, a slightly different word for the boat is used here. It's a diminutive. So in the same way, Jesus is using diminutive way back in verse 5, where he says little children instead of just children. John is using a diminutive for the boat, so little boat. And we're like, wait a second, did the boat shrink? Are they in another boat? And then we look. As far as we can figure, no, it's the exact same boat. We have no idea why he put in the diminutive here. He just did. Okay. But most likely it is a small boat, which is also why they had to drag the fish instead of being able to bring them in. Anyways. And when they had landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. So the fire of burning coals, that is one word. And that word, the only other appearance is in John 18:18, in the courtyard of the palace of the high priest, where Peter is warming his hands over that coal fire as people are questioning him. Do you know Jesus? Are you a disciple? And then Peter denies it. So the disciples are coming, and Peter now is supposed to have a reminder of his greatest shame. And this also opens up the opportunity for the reinstitution of Peter, which happens a little bit later.
But there was already fish on the fire, but
Yes.
Jesus asked for more.
Mm-hmm. So this is what my thought is. So my thought is that there were fish on it, so that's in the plural. Unfortunately, Greek doesn't work like Hebrew, because Hebrew has something called the dual form, which is a plural specifically for two things. So you very often it's used of parts of the body because you have, say, like 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, etc., etc. So Hebrew has a dual form, so we know that it's 2 if it's dual, or if it's just plural, then we go like, oh, it's 2 or more. But we don't have that with Greek. So how many fish were there? And we don't know, but my guess would be 2.
Because of the feeding of the 5,000?
Yes, in the feeding of the 5,000, there were 2 fish. There are 5 loaves and 2 fish. So my guess is that Jesus has 2 fish there. Yeah. And the bread, of course, yeah, they're not bringing bread. Jesus is bringing bread. So he is basically, again, just reminding you of the feeding of the 5,000, that there is something significant here. Oh, yeah, and the word for fish here just changed. Because the word for fish a little bit early on is ichthus, and hopefully it's a decent mnemonic for fish. So you know this symbol, right? Yes. Yes. What does the fish mean?
It was a secret sign.
For the Christians in Rome,
Yeah, but
early Christians in Rome.
what was
Ichthus.
Something
like that.
Ichthus.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes, it was a sign that you were a Christian. It's coming from, and I'll transliterate this because if I just go with Greek terms, it's going to be kind of weird for you. And then Salon, and then Sigma there. Okay, so we have ichthus, word for fish, ichthus. Jesus,
Christus.
Christus, the
Theo.
we soter. Jesus Christ. Oh, sorry. We. No. This is right. No, this would be theos. Sorry. Is that because that needs to be in the nominative case? Sorry. This does need to be in the genitive though. So Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. A nice little mnemonic there for you to remember fish. That's the Greek word for fish, ichthus. Yay! So this is how John's been referring to the fish that he's just caught, along with the other guys. But Jesus is using a different word, or now I'm switching to a different word here, for what Jesus is saying, like you come and grab some fish, and then also John is switching to a different word for fish. And now this new word for fish is not just like a fish, but this is, now we're looking towards a garnish, or as Mel said last time, a condiment type of thing. So a type of food that's meant to be eaten alongside something else. What is the something else there? Well, we have bread now. So the bread is the main thing, and the fish are just complementary. But yes, the new word is meant. Sorry, and the garnished word for these fish, that also is exclusively the one that appears in the feeding of the 5,000. Because again, the bread was the main thing, the fish were there extra.
Interesting.
What was the big important speech around the feeding the 5,000? I am the bread of life. So Jesus is the main feature. Jesus feeding you unto eternal life. That was the point. So he as the bread, like he's not saying I am the fish or the walrus or whatever. But the fish were there and were part of the meal, but Jesus was trying to point primarily to himself.
The Catholic Church, fish seems to take on a more important role. I like Christmas Eve, apparently it's a fish night in the Catholic religion. And certainly Fridays, I don't know if it's still the same, but they didn't eat meat, but they ate fish.
I remember that from overseas, from Germany, Catholic families,
Yeah.
Fridays, they would dish out fish, not meat.
Yeah. So this was, it's a Catholic tradition more than anything else, and it's basically a call to fasting. So you're supposed to fast from meat, but then people were like, but we don't have enough other food. So then the Catholic Church basically said, well, fish are not meat. And it's like, what? No, they're animals. They're definitely meat. But it's like, oh, well, they're a different meat. Therefore, you can eat fish while you're fasting. So it's an odd dispensation rule, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. But it comes by way of tradition.
But to them, it's like a sin to eat fish on Friday. I'm just thinking back to when I took my nurse's training in a Catholic hospital, when it was just not done.
Again, arbitrary rules made by the Catholic Church to say this is how you were pious.
Yeah. I remember, if I may say, my mother served fish on Friday. And then when I asked as a young girl, oh, but we are not Catholic, no. But why? She referred to Good Friday. That was the Friday, on Friday, in remembrance of Jesus, we eat fish. And she did not say we do it like the Catholics. That was just her interpretation what she should do, I guess. Friday's fish day.
Well, maybe in some way it makes you more aware of why you're eating it, so you're
Well,
thinking of
Yeah.
Jesus, maybe it's a good thing.
yeah, so as church traditions go, like even saying, do I have something around me? I should have something. Oh, well, actually, I just drew something. So even with like the church tradition like this, where we get a symbol of the fish and have it around us, and like it can be used as a teaching tool, it can be very helpful in terms of practicing your faith. We just don't want to confuse the traditions with the immutable biblical beliefs. Yeah. But having tradition is nothing to be ashamed about. And we also, if we're properly recognizing it as tradition, we do not want to treat it as divine law. Otherwise, that's going in a very different direction than what God wants us to do. So if I say you have to have a fish marker on your car, or you're practically an atheist, that would be me making a divine law out of a human-made tradition, which is not done. Okay. All right. So then Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish you have just caught. So the 6 disciples on the boat had brought the net basically to the shore, but now it's Peter who's singled out again, so most likely he got there apart from them. Did he get there faster than the boat? Don't know. But Peter's the one who goes out to the boat, and given the wording, now the NIV is absolutely assuming this, but the actual word is Simon Peter got up and dragged the net ashore. So got up, like how do you go up ashore to go down to the boat? So most likely he went up on the boat to start dragging the net ashore. And since Peter is named here, does now Peter have suddenly the strength of more than 7 men to actually drag the net ashore? Or most likely what he's doing is he's now with the other disciples and they're moving the whole thing, or maybe they're taking some fish out of the net to make it lighter so then the rest of them can move it. We don't know. We don't have details. But Peter isn't doing this himself, most likely. Unless he's going in, getting loads of fish out, and the other guys are just counting them now. And then Peter eventually is able to drag them. I don't know. We can ask them the specifics of this if we really want to know. In any case, Peter's now involved in moving the fish, even though he abandoned the guys before. So it's a large catch, 153. Yeah. I was trying to figure out possible symbolism for this as well, because like this is a very definite number. And so you'd assume like it had something to do with something. And like John also, he likes to mention numbers here and there, and usually there's like very specific purposes to them. Like if you go through Revelation, like all the numbers have specific purposes there. So with 153, oh, I should not use red apparently. Okay. I'll have to use this side. So with 153, I was like, okay, this is a pretty weird number.
17 times 9.
I know, yeah. So So if we're going by biblical numbers, for a very symbolic number, we have 3. Because what's the number 3 representing?
Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Triune God.
Yeah. So number 3 represents God. And this comes up all the time. And as Mel said, it's 9 times 17. So we can also divide it by 3 again. And then you get to the prime number of 17, which, yeah, we can't divide any further to see if this makes any sense whatsoever. So we have God squared, and then 17. And then I just going, what on earth is 17? Because in terms of numbers, like, this is the only time I'm aware 153 appears in the scriptures. Like other people have been poring over the Gospel of John since the Gospel of John has been written. And the other people commenting since the 1st century don't really see this elsewhere, that at least not in the scriptures, to really say this is what it must mean. And then when you look for the number 17 in the scriptures, it does come up, but it doesn't seem to come up anywhere important. Because it's like, well, this king, he did this and then he reigned another 17 years. Or this other king, he reigned for a total of 17 years. Or, oh, I think there was another 1 or 2 where 17 came up, but not with the length of time, but like none of it really seemed very significant. So no, it doesn't seem to make any sense as to a greater symbol.
Maybe it was just to be very definite that there was this exact amount of fish, not just
Well,
many, not just the word many.
yeah, but we also have in Luke chapter 5 the other miraculous catch of fish, where there's so many fish that the nets were breaking. There's no mention of the number there. So we're like, well, again, maybe this has some sort of significance. So different church fathers, so going back into the ancient church, have suggested, well, maybe 153 does have some significance, and maybe this references the number of the Gentiles. Maybe there's 153 kinds of Gentiles. And they back this up by, well, 1 or 2 of them, but they're commenting like centuries away from the Gospel of John, and they're going, well, that's how many species of fish there are, 153 in the world. Not that anybody has actually ever said that before they decided that there's 153 different species of fish, but they just went, well, that must be the case. An actual contemporary of John, or close contemporary anyways, close to being contemporary, is Pliny the Elder, who's a pagan Roman. And Pliny the Elder, he wrote a natural history. And his natural history is, as you might expect, a 1st century natural history, or kind of cusp of the 1st century writing would be, because he also talks about how there's a tribe in Africa who don't have heads and their faces are in the middle of their chest, stuff like that. So some of it is going on legend, not as factual as you might want. So Pliny, I think he had a total number of species of fish being in the 80s or the 90s, so nothing close to this. And when the early church fathers, again, since afterwards are talking about this, they're thinking, well, since there's 153 species of fish, is one of each species of fish that was suddenly found in the Sea of Galilee. And you're the freshwater and the saltwater at the same time? I don't think that makes much sense. No.
How many fish would be a standard catch?
I have no idea. I'm sorry, I can't tell.
How many fish would you like?
Kind of a standard catch is the number to indicate just how miraculous the catch it is. Like, is the standard 20 fish, and having so many is.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What, like, Mel referred to 3 times 3 times 17,
Yep.
133. How about 1 plus 5 is 6, plus 3 is 9? Does the number 9 mean anything anywhere in scripture?
God squared.
Yeah, 3 times.
So having 1 plus, yeah, that doesn't really help explain this at all, unfortunately, because that would be unfortunately going more into the conspiracy theory biblical numerology, which you see every so often, like when people are trying to calculate the end of the world and stuff like that, because they will try to work the numbers any which way they can. So I try not to go too deep like that, because then we're just basically violating Occam's razor. The simplest solution is most likely the correct one here. So if we cannot do this, we are multiplying the information beyond its needs, which is more literally Occam's razor.
So
we
what
have
was John trying to say?
Hmm?
What was the message that John was trying to deliver with naming the number of fish?
He wasn't naming any fish.
I know that no numbering the amount of fish,
Yeah.
being specific.
Yeah. So as close as we can figure, this just so happens to be the number of the catch. We've been looking at this, like people have been looking at this from a whole bunch of different angles for centuries, and like some of the interpretations are just really out there. So the best way to really look at this is just say, we don't exactly know why this number is significant, but at the very least, this just happened to be the number of fish in the net. So we could say this represents the number of people who are coming into the church. This seems to be the general consensus for what this must mean from Christians commenting on this throughout the ages. And I have no reason to say that's not what this means. Most likely that is what it is. So this representing how many people the apostles will reach. So a huge number. And people said, like, yeah, that's the number of tribes. The Gentiles, like, we don't have the number of tribes, but sure, yeah, especially Gentiles, we're going to be reaching with them. But yeah, we don't have anything specific with the number.
I remember Jesus saying to Peter, because he was a fisherman, in the future you will be a fisherman.
No, from now on you will
From
be
now
fisher.
on you will
Fishers
be
of men.
fisher of men. Yeah.
Yeah. But that also does not come up remotely in the Gospel of John. That's only a Matthew thing. So it's like, what does John mean by this? In any case, most likely, yeah, it's referring to different people that will be reached.
Couldn't it just refer to the miracle that it was a lot of fish?
Well, it's a lot of fish, yeah, but as for significance of the number, again, we just don't know. Yeah.
Those crazy numerologists would say, oh, it's about pi over 2.
But would numerologists really say it's about pi?
Well, their primitive approximation of 3.14, double the 53.
Yeah, I can't remember what they were actually using for pi at this time, because it was I'm pretty sure, oh shoot, what's his name now? Was it Archimedes? Might have actually been Archimedes. I remember the guy from Syracuse. Was Archimedes from Syracuse? Am I actually thinking of the right name? As he was the one who gave the best approximation of it in the 3rd century BC. I know about this because he actually died during part of the Second Punic War. Because one of my specialties is the Second Punic War. Because that was with Hannibal Barca, the guy who led the elephants over the Alps. And people thought he was nuts. No, he was actually an innovator of lightning warfare. He screwed up the Romans' military plans for decades after this. Anyway, So during that war, Hannibal was in Italy for the most part, but in Syracuse, which is in Sicily. That was where Archimedes was, and he was fairly aged at that time. I think he was in the 70s or nearly 80. And he actually died in one of the conflicts there because he took time to just stop and start drawing figures in the sand because he was trying to figure something, a math problem, well, geometry problem out. And then the guy just, the guard who was trying to take him was like, no, keep moving. He's like, no, don't disturb my circles. And then he just killed him. And it's like, no, he's just being autistic. Stop doing it. You just need to figure out this math problem. So he lost a great mind before his time. But I can't remember what he figured out pi to.
It was just one old.
I think it was like 0.15 or 1.6, and then a couple other numbers because he wasn't quite getting 1.4.
It's fine.
Anyways, I digress.
Thanks.
I really like. He wasn't waiting for a siege to be over. Like people were dying around him, and he was trying to figure out a math problem. That's how important it was to him. Mad respect. Anyways. Anyway, okay. So no, people wouldn't just go to. Oh, it's about. Numerologists are typically far more great. All right.
So sometimes a number is just a number.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Needs a lot.
Don't say that to an engineer. It means something.
Just needs a lot. And I usually argue.
Here's something.
You went to the humanities, didn't you?
Here's something very practical.
Oh.
The disciples had to also have an income. So maybe after they ate breakfast with Jesus, they could sell the rest and live off the proceeds.
Possibly,
I mean, they had to live, right?
yes. But generally, the advice that Jesus was giving them was: do not carry a purse, do not carry extra clothing. Rely on wherever you go on those who accept your message.
So, then they can just give it away, and
Yeah.
people will be helping them at any time later on.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Anyways, so most likely this is going for the Gentiles or some sort of contribution to the gospel, because again, Jesus is like invoking the feeding of the 5,000. Did Jesus need more people bringing in food then? No, he just multiplied the bread and the fish. So when Jesus is asking for the disciples to bring their contribution to this meal, this is something very symbolic, where Jesus is saying, you are now contributing to my multiplication of grace for the people. So Jesus not allowing them to be the bread, he's not giving them that divine nature, no. But he's allowing them to contribute the fish, the garnish to the main meal, which is Christ himself. And then we could also point out, hey, the disciples couldn't catch a thing until Jesus actually gave them this. So even the stuff that they're contributing is coming purely by grace. Yeah. And we'll be getting into that a little bit with the breakfast now. Also, interestingly enough, you'll notice there's no actual mention of them eating anything. They have food, but there's no mention, hey, they actually ate it.
It was 15.
Not when they're actually preparing these things. But what is 15 again? As it is. Yeah, so not exactly eating, but when they had finished mealing, dinnering, breakfasting. That's more or less what that is. Yeah.
Jesus took the bread and gave it to him. I did the same with the fish.
Yeah. So
Yeah, it was playing like a fish.
so I'll come and get to the all things in their due time. So in verse 12, Jesus says, "Come," and this is a fairly rare word, which is weird because you think like, oh well, people say "come" all the time. However, the word for "come" actually does appear rarely, but it does also appear in Matthew and Mark for when Jesus calls the disciples. So this seems to be kind of an iteration of that. That Jesus is like this is John's version of the calling of the disciples, rather than it appearing at the very beginning. It's now coming now at the very end for them to be disciples. So he's saying, "Come and have breakfast." So that's the word for eating there, that, or at least the word that NIV is translating as eating, is the word for that is being translated here as breakfast. It is actually the main meal, not specifically breakfast. Yeah. So come and have a meal.
That's reminds me of communion when you say come for all is ready.
Mm-hmm.
Does that have anything to do with this verse?
No. As I was looking at this and like I was trying to look at it, yeah, so this doesn't have anything specific with communion at all. When you're also looking at John chapter 6, well, the feeding of the 5,000 doesn't exactly have anything to do with communion. But the bread of life discourse, when Jesus is talking about my body is true food, my blood is true drink, like that is definitely pointing towards communion. But the feeding of the 5,000 is kind of a step away from that, weirdly enough. So I was really trying to see, like, okay, well, what's going on here? Yep, I can't see communion. I just can't. And one of the reasons that we can even say that is when communion comes up later on, or at least what we think to be communion comes up later on, say in the book of Acts, it is talking about the breaking of the bread. There is no mention of breaking bread here. Not that they didn't do it, but there's no mention of it. So John didn't think that it was important to mention it.
The word took bread, though, reminds me of communion. Jesus, where he took and broke bread, but this just says took bread.
Yeah, just took bread.
Give it to them.
With the disciples on the road to Emmaus, it wouldn't have been anything if Jesus just took bread. But when Jesus broke bread with them at Emmaus, that is when they're like, oh wait, this is Jesus, because that would have reminded them of the Maundy Thursday meal. Yeah. So breaking of the bread is more communion. Also did the same with the fish. That would be really hard with the fish and breaking.
It's not bread and wine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because there's no wine. Now there's fish, and yeah, you're not breaking the bread. So the expected terminology and one of the very important substances isn't here. Anyways,
So it says this is the third time that Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. But we don't know what interval it was between the second and third time, do we?
No, I covered that at length last time. We do not know. but it's most likely
When?
middle of the range of the 40 days before because at the 40th day following the resurrection, he ascended. So
Okay,
most likely it's middle of that. Like
okay.
pretty much exactly, but that's what I guess. Okay. So none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" And what would that mean? And there's been some guesses like, oh, Jesus' appearance must have been completely different. And they only knew him by his miracles, at which point it's like, well, no. We don't actually have a word of that because the other disciples, well, I mean, like the disciples in general, definitely knew who Jesus was by investigating his body and blood, like actually testing his hands and feet just to see that he rose from the dead. And they knew that he was the Lord, like when he appeared in the locker room. So it doesn't really make sense just to say his face was so different, like he was a completely different person, because that would also ruin their testimony. Because if they say, "Oh yeah, Jesus Christ rose with a completely different body than what he was buried with," then it's like, "Oh hey, well then why wasn't another guy?" Again, and in the other gospels, like it doesn't mention anything of any conclusion of the visual appearance of Jesus. They were actually very much depending on that, the other gospel writers. This was the same appearance of Jesus. Yeah. So most likely what's going on here is they're not, well, I'd say that this might have something to do with Thomas being one of the 7 disciples who are seeing Jesus here. And then also this appearing shortly after, at least in John's gospel. So thematically, right after the appearance to Thomas. So the idea that none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" might just be a reference to any doubt whatsoever. That they don't dare have any doubt that this is Jesus. They're not even going to bother asking that this is Jesus. They're just going to go, "Ah, you are Jesus." We're not going to be like Thomas was. Yeah. Oh, also mention this verb shouldn't be translated as dare to ask him. It should be we're daring, which means that this is an ongoing action. It's an imperfect verb. So so if you think of like them having a meal with Jesus and then giving like shifty eyes towards one another, going like, "You gonna ask? No, I'm not gonna ask you. Are you gonna ask? No, I'm not gonna ask." It was an ongoing thing. Because they knew. And wait a second, I'm trying to remember, is this I'm pretty sure this was imperfect, wasn't perfect. No, yeah, perfect. So they knew it was the Lord. So they absolute certainty they knew it was him. I'll do you one better because I'm pretty sure this is John's version of to know, which is have an intimate relationship with, understanding of faith. They truly believed and knew that Jesus was here with them.
The King James says knowing.
Yep. Well, so the King James is accurate in that because, as I just checked, this is a participle. So this actually has a fine point of Greek grammar to it. So I do actually agree with the NIV's translation of it as new here. I do not agree with that being translated as dared over there, because that should be we're daring. But it is correct. They knew it was the Lord. Because for participles, in a clause, they can function as what we call a finite verb. And that's by virtue of the participle trying to act as a description of the main verb, which is was, or actually technically is. Because that is present tense, isn't it? Yeah, it's present tense. What the heck is NIV? That should be it. It is the Lord. They're trying to. They're trying to assume that this is past perfect. Sorry, not past perfect. Oh, what is the term? Historical present? Yeah, historical present. So John, he's trying to bring this into the present tense by saying, like, this is the Lord. And the word new is trying to, even though it's perfect tense would normally in a sentence try to get all the gravitas. But John is, by using the participle, putting it off to the side. So it's not as important as, like, it is the Lord, and they knew. That is more the sense, the force of what he's trying to get. It is the Lord, and they knew. But NIV is doing a few different things, and I don't like it.
For the Lord is an indication of which of the three?
There's no explicit indication, but given, I'm thinking that this is connected to them not daring to ask who Jesus is because of the whole doubting Thomas episode. I'm pretty sure that they are trying to connect to Thomas's statement, my Lord, my God. So I would say it's most likely them acknowledging that this is like God in the flesh right here. But we don't have anything absolutely explicit. I'm implying it. I'm very heavily implying it, but I don't know.